All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at how a few mud huts on the marshy banks of the Tiber River somehow evolved into a sprawling empire that ended up defining the Western world for 2,000 years. It's an absolutely epic journey through power, ambition, and a legacy that outlasted its own gods. To cover over a millennium of history in one go, we're going to follow a single, relentless narrative arc: the evolution of Roman power. We'll hit everything from the early mud huts to the Republic, the conquest of the Mediterranean, the Republic's fall, the age of the emperors, and finally, crisis, division, and faith.
Part 1, From Mud Huts to Republic, Forging a State.
The story actually kicks off way back in 753 BC. You've probably heard the legend: orphan twins, Romulus and Remus, raised by a she-wolf. Right away, that myth bakes this idea of violence, struggle, and divine destiny straight into their DNA. But the real game changer? That happens in 509 BC. After dealing with the absolute cruelty of their final king, Tarquin the Proud, the Romans had enough. They violently overthrew the monarchy and set up the Republic. This was a brand new system with strict term limits and shared power, literally designed to stop anyone from ever becoming a king again. And just to make sure everyone knew the rules and things were transparent, by 451 BC, they carved their laws in stone with the 12 tables. But, right out of the gate, Rome faced this massive internal crisis. It was a classic class struggle. On one side, you've got the patricians, these wealthy aristocrats hogging the Senate and all the land. On the other side, the plebeians, the everyday farmers and laborers who actually fought Rome's wars but had absolutely zero political voice. So, what did the plebeians do? They literally just marched out of the city and went on strike. Now, Rome could have totally collapsed here, but they didn't. They adapted. They came up with the Tribune of the Plebs, a political office entirely dedicated to protecting commoners. This ability to evolve through compromise, that was going to be their ultimate superpower. Moving into part 2, conquering the Mediterranean, the clash of empires. So Rome unites the Italian peninsula and looks across the sea, only to stare down a terrifying existential threat: Carthage. And guys, this was the ultimate mismatch. Rome had this incredible, unmatched land army full of disciplined citizen soldiers, but absolutely no navy. Zero. Meanwhile, Carthage is sitting there as the richest maritime empire in the Western Mediterranean, with a massive professional fleet and hired mercenaries. So during the First Punic War, Rome literally has to figure out how to beat the world's greatest seafaring power without knowing the first thing about naval combat.
How do they do it? Well, they didn't even try to outsail them. They just changed the rules. They invented this thing called the corvus. Basically, it's a massive hinged boarding bridge with a heavy metal spike on the end. They drop the spike right onto an enemy deck, lock the two ships together, and send their heavy Roman infantry surging across. It was brilliant. They essentially turned a naval battle into a hand-to-hand land battle, completely flipping the script of the war and kickstarting their first true empire.
But of course, that kind of success invites a deadly response. In the Second Punic War, Carthage's military genius Hannibal hits back with terrifying force. At the Battle of Cannae, he uses this incredible convex crescent formation to trick the Romans into basically trapping themselves. And he slaughters 50,000 Romans in a single day. Think about that number. That kind of bloodbath would have wiped out almost any other civilization on Earth. But Rome? They simply refused to accept defeat. They just kept relentlessly rebuilding their armies until they finally took Hannibal down. Which brings us to part 3, the fall of the Republic, crushed by success. So Rome beats Carthage, conquers the Mediterranean, and all this insane wealth, land, and enslaved people flood into the city. But ironically, that massive success is exactly what broke the system. Back in the early Republic, the army was full of citizen landowners who were strictly loyal to the state. But as the wealth gap exploded, a general named Marius started recruiting landless volunteers and paying them with war loot and promises of land. Do you see the problem there? Suddenly, these legions aren't loyal to the Senate anymore, they're loyal to their ambitious commanding generals. The politics of compromise was totally replaced by violence and civil war. And this toxic mix of power and ambition hits a boiling point in 49 BC. Julius Caesar has just conquered Gaul, and his legions are fiercely, absolutely loyal to him. When the Senate orders him to step down, he makes his choice. He drops that famous line, "The die is cast," and marches his army right across the Rubicon River into Italy. That one singular act sparked the civil war that ended the Republic for good.
Part 4, The Age of Emperors and the Pax Romana.
After Caesar's incredibly bloody assassination on the Ides of March, his adopted heir, Octavian, steps right into the power vacuum. He ruthlessly wipes out his rivals, including Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and becomes the sole ruler of the known world. Taking the title Augustus, he knew Romans absolutely despised the idea of a king, so he pulls off a masterclass in political theater. He carefully disguises his absolute monarchy as a quote-unquote restored republic. He keeps the Senate around as a total facade and famously brags, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." And honestly, it worked. This ushered in the Pax Romana, bringing decades of unprecedented peace and stability. But here's the catch. A system built entirely on the competence of one single man is incredibly fragile. By the 3rd century, that structural flaw completely tore the empire apart. We're talking about the crisis of the 3rd century, where they turned through a staggering 26 different emperors in just 50 years. Rome was nearly destroyed from the inside out by plague, hyperinflation, economic collapse, and an endless loop of generals assassinating each other just to sit on the throne for a few fleeting months. And finally, part 5, crisis, division, and faith, a new world. The only reason the empire survived this chaotic mess is because a highly disciplined, pragmatic soldier named Diocletian finally took power. He looked around at the flaming ruins and realized a very simple truth. Rome was just way too massive and complex for one person to govern. So he does something radical. He creates the Tetrarchy. He literally chops the administration of the empire in half, east and west, and sets up 2 senior emperors assisted by 2 junior successors. This chain of command fixed the immediate and administrative problem, but it definitely set the stage for a permanently divided world. After Diocletian retired, that system fractured a bit, but it cleared the runway for Emperor Constantine. Constantine actually manages to reunite the empire for a bit, but he makes massive changes. He moves the capital out to the wealthy east, and then, with the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, he completely revolutionizes Roman society. He establishes religious toleration for Christianity. Think about that. A faith that was brutally persecuted for centuries is suddenly placed right under the protection of the state. It was a monumental pivot. By this point, the center of gravity had permanently shifted. When Constantinople was founded in 330 AD and the formal split happened in 395, it was really just acknowledging harsh geographic and economic reality. The Greek-speaking East was wealthy, highly defensible, and stable. But the Latin-speaking West? It was broke, politically fractured, and constantly getting hammered by tribal invasions, which ultimately led to its official collapse in the 5th century. But here's the crazy thing. Even though the Western Empire fell, Rome never truly died. The foundation they left behind is quite literally the operating system for how we live today. I mean, we're still using their solar Julian calendar. Our civil law systems, our concepts of transparent governance, urban grids, aqueducts, concrete, it all traces back to them. The Latin language is the root of so many modern tongues, and they were the ones who institutionalized the spread of Christianity. The sheer scale of Rome's influence is woven deeply into the very fabric of our modern society, which leaves us with a pretty profound question to ponder. Rome's 2,000-year survival was just this unending story of violent, relentless adaptation. So, will our own modern institutions prove as adaptable as the early Roman Republic? Or are they going to fracture under their own weight, like the later Roman Empire? Thanks for joining me on